So last week, we were given another look at the series A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is a prequel series to the story of A Song of Ice and Fire. It takes place about 80 years after House of the Dragon, and the infamous Targaryen civil war known as the Dance of the Dragons. It also takes place about 90 years before the main story of Thrones. This show is based on books by George Martin, and what we call the Dunkandegg novellas. Currently, there's only 3 books out, but George has said that he's wanted to make more Dunkandegg stories, so a lot like Game of Thrones, this TV show is adapting some incomplete source material. But I actually don't think it's going to be that bad, as there's only going to be 6 episodes for this first season, which I think works because Dunkandegg really isn't a story that needs to be drawn out too much, like House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones. Unlike Game of Thrones, where everyone and everything, practically across the entire world, was a moving piece in a much larger story, Dunkandegg is a bit more contained in its storytelling, as there are only 2 people that we really focus on, though there are some characters that will come in who carry their own weight in the world. Now in this video, I'm not going to get into any major spoilers, as I'm sure there are people out there who haven't read the novellas and are going into this series entirely blind. So in this video, all I'm really going to do is have a discussion with you, share my thoughts, and explain some of the things that I saw, like characters, certain events taking place, at least what I think is worthy of taking note on, other things I may not talk about and save those for future videos when the show comes out. Since, like I said, I don't want to spoil anything, and then I'll have more details to work with and talk about. Our main character in this new story is a man named Dunk, which is short for Duncan. He doesn't have a last name. Unlike many previous characters and protagonists we followed in Game of Thrones and Hot D, Dunk is not from the Targaryen family. In fact, he's not from any family, at least none of the noble ones. He doesn't have access to a lot of money, he doesn't come from an old bloodline, he doesn't have magic blood like the Targaryens do. He's just a guy. Dunk is a low-born man, making his way through Westeros as a hedge knight, which is essentially a knight but less fancy. The armor is less impressive, if they have it. They typically don't have many connections, he's less respected, and a lot of the time to make money, he has to travel around and take up work like a sellsword just to get by. Dunk was born and raised in Flea Bottom, which is the slums of King's Landing. Actually, it's the poorest part of the entire city. So while the Targaryens got to live a life in their castle with wealth and extravagance, he had to go through life the hard way. Not only did he live on the streets struggling to survive, in the books he's also an orphan who didn't know either of his parents. So he's had it rough. But one day, a guy named Sir Arlen of Pennytree, who was also a hedge knight, came along and took Dunk in as his squire, teaching him how to use a sword and all the honorable values of being a knight. The first part of the trailer that we see is Dunk carrying a lifeless man and burying him. This is Sir Arlen. He pretty much dies before the story really starts because he's old and got sick. He and Dunk were actually traveling to a tourney when this happened. The tourney at Ashford looks to be the main setting for this first season, since that's basically what the first novella is centered around. Originally, Arlen was going to compete here, but after he dies, Dunk decides to take his mentor's sword for himself and fight in place of the man who looked out for him. It's here that he ends up meeting his squire, known as Egg, a strange boy who looks, well, like an egg. He essentially pesters Dunk until he agrees to take him on, and so begins an unlikely friendship that will have a lot of twists and turns to come. It's at the tourney of Ashford where Dunk's life really begins to take a turn. But as for how, we'll leave those details blank for the time being. This tourney is host to a lot of interesting people. Many we haven't seen before, but their names are fairly familiar. When Dunk goes to the stable, someone asks if he's Baelor Targaryen. Baelor Targaryen is the oldest son of the current king, Daeron II, also known as Daeron the Good, and his wife Mariah Martell. But despite being the son of a Targaryen king, Baelor actually doesn't look like a typical Targaryen prince. He doesn't have silver hair or purple eyes that they tend to have in the books. Baelor looks just like his mother, Dornish, with darker hair, eyes, and skin. There are even some people who aren't very fond of the Crown Prince being of Dornish descent, since for a long time Westeros has been at war with Dorne, and more than a few people didn't like that Daeron married a Dornish woman, so that may be a conflict we get to see, who knows. I am curious how they are going to tackle Baelor in the show, because in House of the Dragon, we have a lot of angry blonde people, but some of you guys who have only ever watched House of the Dragon may not know that some of these Targaryens do not have silver hair. For example, Princess Rhaenys, the queen who never was. In Fire and Blood, she actually has black hair because her mother was a Baratheon. Daemon's mother, Alyssa Targaryen, who makes a guest appearance in a dream sequence, has silver hair. But in Fire and Blood, her hair was more so a dirty blonde kind of color, and she had two different colored eyes. One was purple and the other was green. And her mother, Alysanne, also didn't have silver hair. She was more of a blonde too. But House of the Dragon really simplifies the Targaryens and removes some of these key features, probably because they want more casual viewers to be able to identify the Targaryens much easier, and also make certain things a bit more clear in the case of Rhaenyra's sons. But that's not the topic of today's video. I do wonder if they're going to do that with Baelor and try to make him a silver-haired Targaryen to really dumb things down. But I do hope that they don't, because Baelor is a pretty cool guy, and more people need to see that Targaryens aren't restricted to having white hair. But moving on. Despite that some people aren't happy that Baelor is of Dornish descent, majority of the people in the kingdoms love Baelor. He's a great warrior, he's dutiful, diligent, understanding of others, and is all around just a great guy. He's also called Baelor Breakspear, which is a pretty badass name because once upon a time, when he was 17 years old, he fought an attorney for his aunt Daenerys' wedding and beat a lot of people. One of them being his uncle, Daemon Blackfyre, the bastard half-brother of King Daeron II, who was legitimized by his father Aegon before he died. This was fairly impressive because Daemon is widely regarded as being one of the best warriors of his time, and he was even given the Valyrian steel sword Blackfyre by his father, Aegon IV. So for Baelor to beat him, it was a very big deal. Daemon has a whole story of his own, which is really interesting, and it may get touched on in future seasons, but for now, just know Baelor is that guy. The next character we're introduced to is Aerion Targaryen, who mistakes Dunk for a stable boy since he's so poor. He's known to be a very arrogant and cruel man. Think Joffrey, but he's a Targaryen and has better hair. In the books, Aerion actually does have long hair. They shortened it in the show, but even so, his barber has Joffrey outclassed, if you ask me. Aerion is also called Bright Flame, despite how edgy he looks, and he's the son of Prince Mycor Targaryen, the younger brother of Prince Baelor, and the fourth son of King Daeron. Unlike him, he actually looks like a Targaryen prince, with white hair and purple eyes. He's also a great fighter, but unlike his brother Baelor with his charisma and ability to befriend and inspire love, he was known to be a rather impatient man who was quick to judge people. He lives in his brother's shadow. They're basically this age's version of Robert and Stannis. Mycor has actually been mentioned before in Game of Thrones, and is actually pretty important to the narrative. He's the father of old Maester Aemon, and this makes Aerion his older brother. So in this show, we're being introduced to his generation of the Targaryen family, getting to see his uncles, siblings, maybe even grandparents. And I don't think it'll happen in this season, but it would be really cool if we got to see a young Maester Aemon at some point as well. Before he was blind and his family was all dead. Maybe we'll even get some insight on the woman he said he loved back in GOT. The next character that we get introduced to is a man by the name of Lionel Baratheon, who I have actually talked about on the channel before. He's one of my favorite Baratheons, and I even named a character after him in one of my What If videos. feel free to check out my What If Robert Baratheon Had a Trueborn Son video. But either way, Lionel is the great-grandfather of Robert, Stannis, and Renly. He's known as the Laughing Storm, since he tends to laugh as he beats the snot out of his opponents. Just from what we've seen in the trailer, I'm sure he's going to be a favorite, especially since, I feel at least, seeing Lionel in action is going to be like getting a peek at what Robert was probably like in his prime, before he needed the breastplate stretcher. Lionel is confident, charismatic, and also a great warrior. He even wears antlers on his helmet, which Robert also did during the rebellion. So in time, I think it's going to be very evident where House Baratheon gets its flair. In the middle of the night at the tourney at Ashford, Dunk and Egg lie beneath a tree and see a falling star. Dunk later paints this on his shield as his own personal coat of arms. Egg says that a falling star will bring luck to those who see it, and Dunk questions if the luck is theirs alone, considering that there are probably multiple people out there who saw this star. Stars seem to be very important in A Song of Ice and Fire, especially when it comes to things like magic and prophecy. House Dane has a sword called Dawn, which is said to be forged from a falling star. It's a powerful weapon comparable to Valyrian steel, and Arthur Dane was basically unmatched when he used the blade. But I guess his luck must have run out since he died during the rebellion. Then there's the prophecy of Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised, which says that the hero to save the world will be reborn beneath a bleeding star. It's showcased as this red comet that sails through the sky, and everyone gets a glimpse of it. Everyone takes the comet as a sign for themselves, or the people they follow. People loyal to the Lannisters think it's meant for Joffrey, and that he'll succeed in the War of Five Kings. Melisandre says that the sign is for Stannis, and that it's proof that he is Azor Ahai. Daenerys believes the comet is meant for her, to herald her rise to power and eventual return to Westeros. And the Northmen think that the comet means Robb will succeed in his war, and they'll finally have justice for Ned. So this notion of a star being special, and that it's meant for someone out there, is nothing new. Stars seem to herald heroes, and this might be Dunk this time around. Dunk says that he's always wanted to be a knight. Arlen raised him to have honorable values, to defend the weak and innocent, and those who can protect themselves with his strength. And it's these values he carries throughout the story. But this question of if he could be more than just a knight is at the very center of the entire story and not just meant for him. The stories of Dunk and Egg are a bit more contained than A Song of Ice and Fire, and of a much smaller scale. Even then, there is this persisting question as Dunk travels, and that is, what does it mean to be a true hero? What makes someone in Westeros? There's this idea of identity and what defines you as you try to write your own story. Is it lands? Is it gold? Titles? Is it your word? Oaths you try to honor? Are you a knight just because someone with more status said you are, or are you a knight because of your actions, your good deeds? We see stuff like this with Jaime. By all accounts, when you first meet him in the story, he's not someone to root for, and you'd hardly call him worthy of being a knight, if we're only judging him by his values and not his prowess with a sword. You don't need to be a knight to be good with a blade, but I digress. Jaime breaks his oath multiple times to multiple kings. He killed King Aerys, slept with his sister, King Robert's wife, not only breaking his vows, but committing an act of incest, and fathering children who parade around as royalty. All these things are dishonorable, but once upon a time, he cared about his vows, and did one of the most noble things he could. He broke his oath and killed his king just to save lives, protecting the innocent like a knight was supposed to do. It is seen as a bad act, as a crime, but it was done for a good reason. So you wonder if the ends justify the means. Then you have people like Gregor Clegane. He was knighted by Prince Rhaegar himself, and it's a cruel piece of irony what he would later go on to do to Rhaegar's family. He's given a title worth its weight in respect. He's a great killer as well, but he's far from being honorable or noble. He doesn't protect the innocent or uphold a code. He brutalizes them because that's what he likes to do. His only oath is in blood. Yet he's a knight, a man of renown even in spite of, or because of his cruelty. Then you have someone like Dunk, who calls himself a knight and a man of honor, but the people don't really want to give him a chance because he's poor and no one knows him. He has to prove himself and learn what it truly takes to not only be seen as a hero, but be worthy of such a title. In a world where almost everything is dictated by wealth, status, old names, and fancy ceremonies, where do you fit into the story? Is greatness something given, or is that something you define for yourself? It's definitely a bit of a departure from the typical war for the throne and who's the rightful heir conflicts we've gotten with GOT and Hot D. I think it's honestly a breath of fresh air, and that's also why I believe the story has potential if they do things the right way. Because this is definitely a story where character focus will do wonders. This is what made the early seasons of Thrones so great, and also why some people haven't been that happy with Hot D lately. Instead of just getting a bunch of spectacle, we could get some actual dialogue, character ideologies that differ from each other, and conflicts that are a bit more intimate and personal, as these mindsets clash, and give you something to think on as well, as our characters struggle in this story for whatever reason. A great example is Ned, his struggle to be an honorable man in a morally corrupt place, Jon constantly trying to decide between his family and his duty, Daenerys learning what it means to be a queen and have people rely on her, turning from a scared girl to a Targaryen conqueror. Now Dunk, a low-born man, fights to find the truth in heroism in a world made to put down people like him. I'm definitely looking forward to A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms and seeing Dunk, Egg, and the old school Targaryens in action. There is a lot of interesting stuff that happens in this time period that I can't wait to see. It's also kind of funny for me to think on now, but this is another show where if you watch it blind to the info of the books and decide to rewatch Game of Thrones, you're gonna need to be careful. Because Joffrey actually spoils the fates of some of the characters in this show. He also spoils some stuff from Hot D and some character deaths. So, tread carefully. His horrid transgressions are timeless. But you guys let me know your thoughts down below and whether or not you're excited for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms to come out, which I will be covering here on the channel in case you all were wondering. But for now though, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I will see you all next time.